I just started reading this question. I forgot to hit record. I'm in the middle of reading this question. The profit from a batch of house mix is $50 and from a batch of fancy mix is $60. How many batches of each type should be made to maximize profits? And then what is the maximum profit? So we're going to define variables first. Defining variables means pick a letter and decide what that variable is going to represent. And I can't tell you how important this step is, because with all these different things happening in numbers here, and just there's mixes and there's peanuts and there's raisins, and we were talking about profit, like there's so many things going on that writing down what your variables represent is very important. So what are we ultimately trying to find that we don't know that could be a variable, something that could change? What does it say to find? How many batches of each type should be made to maximize profits? What are we ultimately trying to find? Katie? Okay, when we say type, how many batches of what? Right, so our variables will be the number of batches of house mix and the number of batches of fancy mix. Those are going to be our variables. So I didn't put a letter with it yet, but I'm going to define them by saying the number of batches of house mix and the number of batches of fancy. Now the variables that we use, you know what, it can be whatever letters you want. You could choose H and F. You could choose X and Y, A and B. Like, it doesn't really matter. Does anybody care right now? Like, yell out, what do you want to use? You want to use H and F? You guys were too slow. I probably would use X and Y, but sometimes I do use the letters. These are just harder letters to write, but that's okay. Sometimes it's good to write the letters because then, again, you're remembering what it stands for. If you wrote on your paper right now, H equals house mix, I would mark that wrong because H does house mix. What does H equal? It's a number of batches of house mix. Like, H is always a number. It's not a noun, right? There is one more variable which sometimes I define and sometimes I don't, so I don't want you to be totally confused if you see it somewhere on one of my assignments, because sometimes I put it there and sometimes I don't. I think it just depends on who you have, but there is one other unknown thing here. What are we also trying to find? The maximum profit. So I might say that P is going to represent the profit. Okay. Now the objective function is overall, if I know the numbers of batches of house mix and fancy mix, overall my objective is to have the highest profit. That's my objective by having this business. So my objective function is, how am I going to get the highest profit? So I'm going to say P for my objective function. That's going to equal, how do we get profit for this? How do I get profit? Here it is, the profit from a batch of house mix is $50 and from a batch of fancy mix is $60. There it says the profit. 50H plus 60F. That's how I'm making my profit. So that is objective function. Now the constraints. When we start to graph this, there are certain things. Here's where some people struggle a little bit. The first two constraints we shouldn't struggle on. The first two constraints, we're going to talk about H and F just as what they can possibly be. And here's a huge hint to you. I only gave you first quadrant. What do we know about the number of batches of house mix? Can't be negative. Thank you. I was about to say, can they be negative? They cannot be negative. So we're going to say that H has to be greater than or equal to 0 and F has to be greater than or equal to 0. Like, they can't be negative. So that makes it just first quadrant, which I printed out for you, so there's a big hint. Now the next constraints are going to have to deal with other things up here. max values or maybe some min values. There's some values up here that the company does not have control over right now. A trail mix has 200 pounds of peanuts and 100 pounds of raisins. That's all they have. So they don't have more than that. We can only use a maximum of 200 pounds of peanuts. The batch of house mix takes 20 pounds of peanuts and 10 pounds of raisins, so there's some constraints right there. And the fancy is 10 pounds of peanuts and 20 pounds of raisins. Here's the most complicated thing. We're going to make a constraint that has to do with peanuts. And we're going to have a constraint that has to do with raisins. Because those are the two totals they gave me. They gave me 200 pounds of peanuts is the max that we can use. And 160 pounds of raisins is the max that we can use. We can't go over that. So I know that that is a total that I have to stay less than or equal to. So those are going to be the start of my other two constraints. If you're using color, this is where I'm going to like go up here and make it even easier for you to follow. Since this equation itself is going to have to deal with peanuts, I'm going to underline every single thing up here that has to do with peanuts. Here's 200 pounds of peanuts. A batch of house mix takes 20 pounds of peanuts, and a batch of mix takes 10 pounds of peanuts. I have underlined in blue everything that has to do with peanuts. Those are the only things that are allowed to go in this peanuts constraint. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take 20 pounds of peanuts per house batch, so 20H, plus 10 pounds of peanuts per fancy mix, 10F. So peanuts, peanuts, peanuts. It's really hard to say and not say the wrong thing. Okay. The other thing we have is 160 pounds of raisins. So I'm going to find the other stuff that has to do with raisins. 10 pounds of raisins and 20 pounds of raisins. So that's all one equation. 10 pounds of raisins is house. So 10H plus 20F. I would totally only buy the house mix because I don't like raisins. Random piece of information for you. So we write our constraints. The next thing we're going to do is sketch the graph. I would not just start sketching the graph. I would start finding the information that I need to put on the graph before I actually draw the graph, because I don't know what my scale is going to be yet. So my scale might be fine for this one, but then I have to totally change my scale to make this one fit. Like I'm going to find like my x and y intercepts first before I start sketching anything. So with the peanuts question, if I do my x and y intercepts, my x-intercepts will be 20H equals 200, so H is 10. And my y-intercept will be 10F. I called it Y. I really should call it H and F-intercept, I guess, is equal to 200. So F is 20. So we have 0, 20. So just looking at that one alone, my scale has to fit 20 numbers in it at least. I better check the other one also. So raisins, 10H equals 160, so H is 16. 20F equals 160, so F is 8. So now when I start drawing my graph, I just need to make sure all these numbers fit. I haven't counted to know if they fit yet. Looks like the biggest number I need is 20, and that is on the y-axis. All right, so this box that I've given you, this quadrant that I've given you, goes to 20. So that means 20 will be right here. So for my blue one, I've got a y-intercept, or what axis? This is the f-axis at 20. And on my h-axis, or the x-axis, I have, what, 10? Do you guys have straight edges out, or do we need to grab some? Some of you have. There's one right there, because my other classes can't clean up after themselves. Some of you have one. Here, take them. The blue one up here, F goes, or 10 goes into 220 times. Oh wait, you guys are using your computer. You don't need straight edges if you're using your computer. My bad. Sorry. I need a straight edge because I'm not using my computer. Now if you're using paper, you need a straight edge. On your computers, there's like a straight line option. On the
It has a circle and a square.
Does it say shapes? Because that'd be. I do. I think. Yeah, you can see some up there. I do have graph paper. I also have first quadrant graph paper up there too. Just take whatever you want. Just Marco, the graph paper that I have on there doesn't match this graph paper, so you just have to count. Okay. Okay, guys. So I've graphed my x and y intercepts. I have a line for this, but that's not all I need. What also do I need? The shade. So we can test a point. I always test 0, 0 if I can. So I'm going to test 0, 0. I'll just test it over here. So I'll get 0 or less than equal to 200. Is that true? So then that means I will shade this direction eventually. And then the one that I did in orange, we've got 16 and 8. So I use my straight edge. I'll check my, I'll check the point 0, 0. And I get 0 less than equal to 160, which is true, so I will shade this direction. So then they overlap. I also have the two other constraints, which makes me shade in the first quadrant, but since your teacher only gave you the first quadrant, I don't really need to shade that part. Thanks, Miss Criswell. You're welcome. This is where the two overlap. So what is our next step? We learned last class. What is our next step? Find our vertices. So this, we've got 4 vertices. 3 of them are super easy to find. The 4th one, we might be able to guess, but we should probably check that it's right. Or you could use substitution or elimination to find the 4th one. The 3 for sure. Oh, I said sketch graph. This is where the space I left for all of your graph sketching, like information. Whoops. I put it over there. All right, so the vertices, I believe 0, 0 will be one of them. 0, 8. 10, 0. And then this last one, I'm not sure. We're going to guess something. What do you think it looks like? 8, 4. So I'm going to put 8, 4 right here, but I'm going to check it in these equations up here, just to be sure. So So 20 times 8 plus 10 times 4 has to be 200, and 10 times 8 plus 20 times 4 has to be 160. Yep, it checked in both. So we know for sure that is the answer. Again, I did this last class again. If you can't tell, you use elimination substitution, and then that way Bertie checked it as well. So we've got our 4 vertices. We're going to take these 4 vertices, and what are we going to plug them into? The what? The objective, the profit. Okay? So we're going to do 50 times 0 plus 60 times 0 is 0. We're going to do 50 times 0 plus 60 times 8 is 160. We're going to do 50 times 0 plus, nope, just kidding, 50 times 10 plus 60 times 0 is 500. And we're going to do 50 times 8 plus 60 times 4 is 640. Did I make any mistakes by not using a calculator? What did I do wrong? Oh, yeah, I don't know. See? Huh. 60 times 8 is not 160. I don't know why I was thinking 8 times 2 for some reason. 60 times 8 is 480. Yeah, there we go. Now let's try again. Did I make any other mistakes today? Huh? Maybe. What? It's just an ugly 8. Huh? I got all these seats right here. Nobody's making you sit there. Blindy, come up here. All right, you guys, look at this. What do you think the company should do to maximize profits? 8 what? For what? What's 8? What's 4? Not pounds. 8 house what? 8 what? Batches. We should do 8 batches of house and 4 batches of fancy mix to maximize. Yeah. Try that again. Maximize profit. And the profit would be, the max profit would be $640. So your answer is going to involve words and numbers, because this is a word problem. It is a word challenge. It's not a problem. Challenge. And your profit will have like a unit, dollars. Okay? Okay. Yes. No, it'll tell you what you need to find. The assignment was only 4 questions, and they asked you to do both just so you understand how to do both. But if we want profit, I hope we're going for max profit, right? There are minimum things. So now this one is the exact same kind. However, it is not laid out for you so nice. So you have to use this first page to know what to do until you get used to it. When I give you a quiz or test, I will have all these blanks because that'll make it easier for me and you to get it done or graded, okay? But for homework, I'm not giving you all those blanks. So I'll have handy. I'll keep telling you what we need to do. You guys have them. You could scroll if you need to. You are taking you're taking a test in which multiple choice questions are worth 10 points and short answer questions are worth 15 points. Takes 3 minutes to answer each multiple choice question, 6 minutes to answer each short answer. The total time allowed is 60 minutes, and you may not answer more than 16 total questions. Assuming all of your answers are correct, how many questions of each type should you answer to get the highest score? All right, let's start with variables that we need to define. What are we trying to find? We're trying to, how many questions of each type should you answer to get the highest score? What are we trying to find? Number of what? What kind of questions? Number of MC. We also want the number of short answer, essay. Is that okay that I'm writing those like that? So what should we call the number of multiple choice and the number of short answer? X and Y, sounds good. You guys can choose whatever letters you want. There's one more variable, something that could vary, and that is our highest score. So that'll be S. Now, the S is not highest score. You want the highest score. S is just score. Okay, so next we do is we write the objective function. Objective function. That is like ultimately, if you're taking a test, you want to get the highest score, right? So our objective function is how do we get the highest score? S, how do we get any score? It's going to be the number of multiple choice questions that you answer multiplied by how much they're worth. How much are they worth? 10 points each. Okay, so 10x plus, what about the short answer? 15y. So there's your objective function. Constraints next. Constraints. Can we have negative numbers of questions answered? No. So we'll have x is greater than or equal to 0, y is greater than or equal to 0. There are some other constraints up here. We've got some totals. Does everybody see a total? I see 60 minutes, yeah. So 60 minutes is the maximum time allowed. So you can't go over 60. 60 has to be the greatest thing. So that's why I wrote less than or equal to. And this is minutes if you need to write it down. 60 is minutes, so I'm going to go back up there and I'm going to look for anything that has to do with minutes. Here's minutes. 3 minutes to answer multiple choice. And I see 6 minutes per short answer. Right? So 3x plus 6y. And we can't go over 60 minutes. And then what else is another total up here? 16 total questions, but it doesn't have anything else up here about questions. I know the total has to be 16 or less. Who said that? Who's me? Oh, Neil. X plus Y, right? The total number of multiple choice plus the total number of short answer cannot exceed 16. So they didn't need to give you any more information about that because it's just that total number. So there you've got all your constraints. Now what do we do? We graph them, then what do we do? Find our vertices. That's while you're graphing them. After we get it graphed, we find where they overlap, then we find our vertices. Then what do we do with our vertices? Check. And then are we looking for the highest number or the lowest number for your score? Highest number. I'm trying to go fast because I want to make sure I get through the part that's new today. If on like the last question, oh, this is the last question. If I have time to finish that one, that'll be fine. I can even go back and finish this one if we have an extra time. I just want to make sure that we get through all the part that is new today. Okay, so starting here, everything should be review. Okay. Wheels Incorporated makes mopeds and bicycles. Experience shows that they must produce at least 10 mopeds. The factory can produce at most 60 mopeds and 120 bicycles per month. If the profit on a moped is $134, the profit on a bicycle is $20, and they can make 160 units combined. How many of each should Wheels Incorporated make per month to maximize profit? All right, what are we going to start with? Variables. What don't we know? Let's read like towards the end. How many of each should they make per month to maximize profit? What's each? What, Cooper? Mopeds and bicycles. What about mopeds and bicycles? How many? So the number of. Okay, so you can use M and B. You could use X and Y. You can use A and B. It doesn't matter what you want to use. I'm going to use X and Y because I am not creative. X is going to be the number of mopeds, and Y is going to be the number of bicycles. If you didn't go in the same order as me, if you said X is the number of bicycles and Y is the number of mopeds, and you set it up that entire way, you could get all the same answers. It's just that your graph would have like the things on different axes, so your graph would look slightly different than mine. That doesn't mean it's wrong. There's nothing here that says mopeds has to be X. That's why you have to define the variable so I can follow your work. So I know that you meant mopeds as X, or if you meant bicycles as X. Okay? Don't know if that made sense. We also have to maximize profit, so I'm just going to say that P is the profit. So there's my variables. Let's do our objective function. Our objective function is going to be for profit. How do we make profit? That's going to give me profit. There's no money in what you just said. Profit's going to have to be money. So we're looking for money if we're talking about profit. Where's money up here? So 134x, right? Plus, oops, I forgot my x. Plus 20y. Right, because it's $134 per moped. $20 per bicycle is our profit. We add them together. Constraints. We've got, can we have negatives? Okay. So I know that x has to be greater than 0. But there's another constraint up here about x besides greater than 0. Experience shows that they must produce at least 10 mopeds. So I can't produce one moped. It's not worth it for them to have all that equipment and just produce one moped. They need to produce at least 10 mopeds, and then the factory can produce at most 60 mopeds. So the number of mopeds that we make, this is not just x is greater than 0. This is x is actually greater than 10, but less than, greater than equal to 10, but less than equal to 60. So that one's a little bit different than a lot of other ones. It is still in the first quadrant, but it's not just bigger than 0. It's bigger than 10, less than equal to 60. Is there anything about the y values, the bicycles, that has something like that? It does have to be less than equal to 120. What about a minimum for y? Minimum up there? No, but 0 is the minimum, right? They can't produce negative. So we will go ahead and put the 0 in there. All right. Are there any other constraints? Any other totals up here that we didn't talk about yet? So our numbers up here we haven't used yet. The combined 160 units. So the units would be like just items they're making. So we can only make 160 things. So 160 would be the greatest amount of what would be my equation? X plus y. So if I add them together, a total of 160. So I'm going to find like x and y intercepts. The x's and y's are already given to you, and I'm looking right now. The y-intercept has to go up to 120, so I'm not counting by ones, right? Let me just find these real fast. These should be easy. What's our x-intercept for this? 160. And what's our y-intercept? Also 160. So it looks like the highest number we need is 160. There's 20 of these. What do you think we could count by? Yeah, I don't like counting by 8s. How about 10s? You can count by 8s. Your choice. But whatever you're counting by, it better be obvious to me. If I'm counting by 10s, I'll do this for you. 10, 20, 30. 10, 20, 30. Could I count by different things on each axis? Could I count one axis by ones and one not for this problem, but in general? I could count different things on each axis, but these numbers are similar, so I'm just counting the same. But you could count different things on each axis. Just put a few numbers so I can figure it out. If you have no numbers at all, I'm not going to have a clue. So let's see, on our x-axis, we'll have, my purple one is going to be 10 and 60, and those are both on the x-axis. What kind of lines will I have for x is greater than or equal to 10 or x is less than or equal to 60? What kind of lines are those? Who knows? Yell it out. We have like 8 minutes. Who knows? What are they? If I have x is greater than or equal to 10, what kind of line am I drawing? That's a vertical line, right? I can't see this. Okay? And same thing with 60. If it's x, vertical line. And where will I be shading? Between these two lines or outside of these two lines? In between, because it's between these two. And we do our y's, which I did in blue. Y's will be horizontal, so we're going to go from 0, which I'll get in a moment, to 120. I don't really need to graph this one because it's already there, but. And it will be shading in between those lines as well. So far I have this rectangle. Now we also have x plus y is less than or equal to 60. We've got 160 and 160. I do find it helpful for me to write down, even if I don't write down every single number, I do find it helpful for me to write the 160s down. I'll get it in a second. No. All right. And then we got to figure out shading, so let's test a point. If I plug in 0, 0, what do you think? Does 0, 0 work? Does 0, 0 get shaded if I plug in 0, 0 into the orange one? Yes. So we'll shade towards 0, 0. They all overlap in a pentagon. If it's a pentagon, how many yeah, 5. Okay, take a moment, see if you can find all 5 vertices.